Did you work on the recent episode of Pause with Sam J? I know you've worked on that show before. The one about
Yeah,
school and she was kind of being disruptive in the classroom and like the way her teachers were. That team. Did you work on that
yeah,
episode? Yeah, I like that episode. I watched that recently. I was like, yo, I can relate to like being disruptive in school and not feeling like you kind of like are learning.
yes. The SMDK episode. Yes, I
Yeah,
did that.
that's the word I couldn't. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm definitely. I was finishing that as I was putting the finishing touches on the movie. It was working on that as I was putting the finishing touches on the movie. It was a whirlwind, like editing for Sam J and HBO, as well as kind of trying to get this film,
Mm-hmm.
landing this film in Tribeca.
Editing film too is like you're in a whole universe. Like it's like a
Yes,
casino, right? There's like no clocks and there's no windows, there's nothing. You just kind of you got to just get there and then you hope you hit the jackpot basically.
bro, you're right about that. You're just in a dark room for months on months. For in the case of this film, we were in there for years. We basically, I want to say, started editing about 2015. So about 2015, we started trying to put concepts together. So it's definitely a process. Editing is a process that nobody really knows how much time goes into these things, but we definitely spend a lot of time in the edit bay moving stuff around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a magic trick. People see you pull the rabbit out of the hat or make the coin disappear or whatever it may be, and they don't realize how much practice it takes to do the sleight of hand or to make the magic happen basically.
Yes, the kind of this it all becomes like storytelling at some point. You know what I mean? Where you're trying to take the audience on a ride, and move beyond kind of just resume facts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want to be Wikipedia dry.
Right. And so just it took a while to be able to move beyond those type of move beyond those type of edits.
Mm-hmm. Yo, welcome to my Summer Lair. I'm your host, Sammy. I can do the robot, but I can't do the worm, Younan. In 2008, Marvel Studios released Iron Man. This is how it all started. By 2012, all of Marvel's cinematic superheroes had assembled in Avengers. The MCU was up and running, having established a formidable pop culture experience. Similarly, Detroit was home to a group of techno DJs, a Sonic Avengers, the Techno 6. So when you think of Detroit, you usually think of like Smokey Robinson, Jay Dilla, Jackie Wilson, White Stripes, Eminem, Alice Cooper, Bob Seger, the Supremes. I'll even toss in Stevie Wonder. Detroit has given us so much music. And you know all of these musicians, you know all their hits. But one of Detroit's greatest contributions has been overlooked and undervalued: techno. The electronic music phenomenon was created by Detroit DJs in the 1980s, big banged by the Techno 6. That spark transformed dance music internationally and blossomed into the multi-billion-dollar industry of EDM today. And just who were the Techno 6 who gifted us with all this incredible techno music? That's the exploration of Kristian R. Hill's God Said Give 'em Drum Machines, screening at Tribeca Film Festival. Though often techno sounds like the future and sci-fi and spaceships, God Said Give 'em Drum Machines lets us look back in the past like a time machine. So yeah, let's visit Detroit in the late 80s by talking to director Kristian Hill.
Sound, the final frontier. My Summer Lair is an enterprise, a pop culture voyage with a continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new creators and celebrate established producers, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now here is your host, Sammy Younan.
All right. I know you're based in LA now, primarily, but like, I just want to kind of get an updated report card. How is Detroit these days? Like, the city has gone through a lot of changes in the last 20 or 30 years. Like, do you still hear from people that are there? Like when you go there, is the vibe completely different? Like, how is Detroit these days?
I mean, Detroit is, I like to call it, Detroit is active. It's fun, you know. The way that kind of the city has kind of grown through this process of like redevelopment or redefining. It's just a Renaissance city. It's always been a Renaissance city, but
Mm-hmm.
I believe that man, it's fun to get back to Detroit, and I still run into a lot of the people who I grew up with. The dance scene, in particular, man, is so active. Clubs and stuff. Uh, our Spotlight, TV, Marble Bar, Motor City Wine, like all these clubs are now active, and the music is everywhere. Excuse me, when I go home. So Detroit for me now is like I like to say it's my muse, but it's definitely a place that I spend a lot of time, and I'm always open to go back and hang out.
Yeah, and so I want to extend on that thread because your documentary, God Said Give Him
Hmm.
Drum Machines, it opens in
Hmm.
Detroit, Michigan. It's based in Detroit.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and as you said, it's a Renaissance city. So, but we also, a lot of people generally know Detroit is like Motown. There's a number of sounds and
Hmm.
genres that are associated with
Hmm.
Detroit. Detroit has given us a
Hmm.
lot of remarkable music. So,
Hmm.
is that what you're talking about with the Renaissance city? Like, why Detroit? What are the elements of Detroit that produce all this quote unquote soul music?
Oh man, I have to say that the people who come up from the South, and people who kind of made their homes in Detroit during the 50s and 60s. I mean, they brought like a special type of how can I say it? They brought a special type of courage. They brought a special type of feeling to the town. So it's like when you talk about Motown and you talk about jazz, and you can talk about some of the funk things that came out of Detroit in the 60s and 70s. It's only right that this music techno would come from there, because it's a town also of like musicians early on. You had like all these musicians that came trying to be a part of the Motown sound, or trying to connect themselves to what was happening in the 70s in Detroit. And that whole kind of I want to say class of artisan um, gave way to in the future, when these young kids came up, they had those kind of people to kind of lean on and to talk to, not only to talk to about music, but talk to about making music. So there was always kind of this uh, passing on of information that was happening in Detroit between musicians, both generationally and intergenerationally.
Heritage.
So yes, yes.
It's not just heritage, but is it also about hustling as well? Because I feel like your documentary is a little bit about hustling and kind of like quote unquote getting your groove on.
Man, hustling in the context of taking your sound, or taking your want and willingness to want to play this music in front of people. Yes, hustling from that standpoint. People wanting to be more and having dreams, as Kevin says, having dreams, and then actually actualizing those dreams. Like, so from that standpoint, it's definitely hustling. But these guys, all of them, were dreamers and believed in themselves, and at certain points believed in each other to kind of like take this music to new levels and new spaces.
Yeah, so then is God Said Give Him Drum Machines? Is it a love letter to techno, like specifically Detroit techno, or is this a love letter to Detroit's black culture?
mm. I think it's one and the same. I think it could be two things at once,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a love letter not only to Detroit and its place as a entertainment or a musical hub, but it's also a love letter to all the men and women who made up the Detroit sound, which we've come to know today as techno.
Yeah, you are to Detroit what Batman is to Gotham City. You have like just talking to you now, like you clearly hear and feel a deep love for this city and like its vibe, its inhabitants, it's like the culture, all of it. If you were able to like kind of distill it into like a Hallmark Valentine's Day card, like can you express what Detroit means to you or how you feel about the city?
Oh man, I mean, I love the city, you know, and the people who I've come up with, mm, like many of them are, you know, just a lot of my contemporaries. We all have a deep love for Detroit and what it means to us. Like, not only, I mean, my partner Jennifer has a deep love for Detroit. All of us that worked on the film, you know, Eric Jackson, Mary O'Brien. I mean, it's just a whole team of us that really kind of used our love and kind of admiration for the city as the fuel to kind of get this film done. And just we wanted to make sure we could tell a story that not only Detroiters would love, but Detroiters would love, but also you know, people who get to know Detroit, that they would have the opportunity to kind of experience it the way that we see it, you know.
Like a time machine.
Yeah, yeah, definitely going back to those days, like because that was a time in the '80s when this music was pure. It wasn't. There was no drugs connected to it. There was no uh, kind of other influences on it. It was just these guys making music and and just really finding a way to get this sound out as they saw it or as they heard it in their heads and stuff. So um, definitely, you know, Detroit and this music and these guys. This movie is a love letter to all of it. You know.
And these guys that you're talking about, there are specifically 6 black producers from Detroit that you follow. You want to just give us a little snapshot of who these guys are?
Nah, thank you, man. These guys are Juan Atkins, Eddie Folks, Kevin Saunderson, Blake Baxter, Santonio Eccles, and Derek May. These guys are what I like to call the first cover boys of techno. These are the Techno Six.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, they were kind of broken up into, you know, the Belleville Three and things of that nature. But my film and what I wanted to show is that when you look back, it was more than just 2 or 3 individuals who made this music what it is. It was built on the early records of all 6 of these guys, and all of them have, like, when we look back, have amazing catalogs that people recognize as some of the early music of techno and Detroit dance music.
Your documentary focuses on the Techno Six, as you call them, these guys, and I know it does focus on the music as well. But I was curious why some of the other aspects of like EDM and some of that culture, from the fashion, the dances, there were elements that you chose not to explore in the documentary, and I just wonder, I was curious why you chose not to touch upon them. Because it's a whole culture, right?
Yes, but help me understand what, so I can see what maybe I didn't touch upon.
The documentary does a great job of focusing on, like you said, those DJs and those producers and following their story. But in terms of like the broader culture itself for like EDM and dance music, like there was specific dances, there was a lot of fashion, there's a lot of elements of that culture that it's the same thing, I guess, with like hip hop. Hip hop is more than just like a rap music, right? There's a lot of slang, there's a lot of fashion, there's a lot of like dancing, and like your documentary is basically like talking about like the equivalent would be like DJ Cool Herc and some of those block parties and Cool Crush Crew and some of the other earlier people that we kind of forget because now we just think about like Tupac and Jay-Z and other like current people,
Yes.
right?
No, man, a great, well, how I'm starting to kind of like see this is the equivalent of kind of like when you go to the museum and you go to the Egyptian artifacts and you see the mummies and the tombs and their faces are blown off, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't really know what that was. And so really over the past 12 years, I've been kind of trying to put the faces back on these mummies that these artifacts that have been kind of destroyed over the years. And, I hope I did a good job, but it's like people forget about, history is always being written and rewritten. And, I'm just trying to do my best, or we are as a team are trying to do our best to kind of like, again, put a human face on this music and how it came to be. I think a lot of times these films kind of like spill off into resume and DJ kind of accolades,
Mm-hmm.
when really there's a lot of hard work and connection involved. And so this film kind of reflects on kind of the human side of kind of what happened, and not even what happened, just how this business began to work itself on them, so that, here we are 30 years later and this story is still rather untold.
Yeah. So then, what is your relationship to these mummies then? Like, how did all this music and these DJs come into your life, other than obviously growing up in Detroit?
I mean, that's the way that, not only coming up in Detroit. I mean, where I'm from, just like in New Orleans, where kids are gravitate to brass band instruments. Growing up in my neighborhood, kids gravitated to turntables, beat machines, samplers. Juan Atkins' grandmother lived around the block from me, as a
Mm-hmm.
kid, as an 8-year-old, you know, um, eighth grade, ninth grade, my older brother introduces me to DJs Alan Esther, Ray Berry, and also Steve Dunbar. These guys are legends within the Detroit dance music community. But as a 13, as a teenager, I mean, they became kind of my mentor and kind of guide into the world of progressive music, is what we used to call it back then. And them being the guides, always stuck with me. And just over time, I took the whole DJ culture aspect of it and turned it into filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
So my connection to this music and this culture is much deeper than most filmmakers who have been a part of it, because I actually was there and kind of saw this thing go from it being progressive music to it to being house music to them putting out the album, the new dance sound of Detroit, and then Kevin and Paris put out Good Life in Inner City as an album. And I remember when that record came out, I would tell people, because at the time I was in Baltimore, Maryland, I would tell people that this music is from Detroit. This music is what they call techno, and they would laugh, or
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't have any really context or clue of what I was talking about. And for years, the way the term techno kind of morphed into this whole other culture and look that was foreign to me. That by the time I met Richie Houghton in South Africa, I was asking him, when did this become Detroit techno? I just
Mm-hmm.
thought it was techno.
Yeah.
And so he was one of the first ones to kind of let me know, like, hey, and I'm paraphrasing, but the names of genres and stuff got out of our hands a long time ago, and that this is a ecosystem of music. And so he gave me a couple different ways to look at it, and over time I appreciated that, because it's spot on.
Mm-hmm. So sticking with your background then, like, do you have a background in science fiction? Like, I'm curious, are you a nerd? Like, because we're dealing with
I mean,
a lot of music, obviously, that sounds like spaceships and space and future and technology. So, are you a nerd?
Uh, no, by
Okay.
by no means. I don't think that I've ever been called a nerd. But I will say that, man, this is just kind of my interest, and I studied urban policy here at the New School for Social Research in New York. I mean, so I at one point was a was on track to, do sociology, look at city planning, so I just come at this kind of from an academic standpoint as well,
Yeah, I can
because
tell.
I
Yeah.
understood research and
Mm-hmm.
trying to get to the bottom of things, or getting closer to the truth as I could get from what these guys would tell me.
Yeah, and this isn't your first rodeo either. Like you made 8 short films, I think it was, exploring dance and Detroit electronic culture
I
via the.
mean,
Yeah.
yes, while we were making this movie, we definitely, how could you say, just every time we could get a chance, we kind of took our footage and tried to edit it into something, and some of those microfilms, we did one on Al Esther, we did one on Delano Smith, uh, which Delano kind of helped, produce. Like, we did a couple on Juan, and, of course, Norm Talley and Kyle Hall. But I think out of all those short films that we made one called Electric Roots. It was a short film that took us to the Cannes Film Festival in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And that film had Black Coffee, Richie Hawtin, Issa Williams, let me see, Nesker One, uh, Digital. It's just groups that were from South Africa. A lot of guys that really like kind of explained to us how Detroit and South Africa connect in many ways. And we also learned just how the scenes differ in many ways. But that film, Electric Roots, was really kind of our first, chance to show people what we do and what we had. And, we got the opportunity to go to the Cannes Film Festival. So that was great. But it still took us some time to get the funds and everything we needed to make this film.
Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about that process. You said already it's a 12-year process. You got like a shout out on Arsenio Hall. You were rejected from Sundance. You had either audio that was lost or stolen. Like there's all these setbacks and frustrations. So kind of give me a view of what that process was like. Because 12 years with one project is a long time. And so to finally be here at Tribeca must be like major relief.
Man, it's a major relief. And like over the 12 years that, it starts really with the death of my mother. You know what I mean? My mother passed, and I was in Detroit with a Canon 5D, like looking for something to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I started filming, not only DJs, just around the city, and just using the camera as a means to grieve and cope. For the first few years, it was just like the camera gave me the opportunity to travel. In those early years, we went as far as Nizhny Novgorod, Russia. We went to London. We went to, of course, Cape Town, Johannesburg, um, Berlin. We traveled all over the world in those like first years, just following the thread of this music. And I want to say it's 2016. I lose my father. My father was a big supporter, not only for myself but for the film. Like, we come to town, he'd let us drive his car. I could stay in his basement. Just
Yeah.
all the things that you really don't think about when it comes to making a film. Like, rental cars, the cost of housing and hotels, like all that stuff.
It takes a
Then
village.
became, yeah, it takes a village, and just over time, um, you kind of forget about how much sweat equity really moves the ball to the end zone. Yes, cash does keep everything going with sweat equity is what kind of gets us to the, it gets us to the end zone. It's a lot going on behind the scenes sometimes, and it's not cash driven. It's people in it, and inertia driven, just energy driven. A lot of these cuts, they're happening over months where there's no budget, so the journey is one where like you mentioned, I think, like we talked about before, you're in a dark room most of the time.
Yeah.
And you're trying to see this landing. That's one thing me and Dave Pellicharo, also Katie at XTR, Christina at XTR, and my executive producers, Shaka and, Catherine, that we all talk about is kind of like, how is this thing going to land? What do we got to do to finish it? And like, these conversations are happening like all the time, but the work has to catch up with these conversations and, the clearance of stuff. It just gets real. In the end, it gets real. The minutia of like every edit becomes important. So, yeah, the journey is one where you just kind of are always trying to figure out how do we end it, or how do we finish, because you never know when that date's going to come. Like, if we hadn't got into Tribeca, we would still be working on the film.
Right. It's funny how your journey and what you just described kind of mirrors like the Detroit techno music. Like, it just started locally, and you're just walking around grieving. You got your little 5D camera, and you're trying to shoot. You're trying to find a voice. You're trying to make something. And all of a sudden now you're in up all these different. You're at Cannes. You're at like Berlin, South Africa. Like, you win places. The camera took you places the same way that this Detroit techno music took these DJs and these sounds places.
Yes, for sure, man. And a lot of these places, we would see people who love this music, man, and love these guys, and knew all about Detroit. I can remember being in Nizhny Novgorod, Russia, and a gentleman by the name of Dmitry, like, he knew everybody. He knew their histories. He knew kind of their last releases. He knew the labels that they worked for outside of themselves, everybody, from Juan on down to like Anthony Shake Shakir, Norm Talley, Mike Clark, Delano Smith, the Beat Down crew. And like, this guy in Russia knew more about Detroit techno than most Detroiters.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, so we definitely ran into those type of technophiles, and they wanted to just let us know that they love this music, and the people that make it are their heroes.
I want to stay with technophiles because your documentary does a great job too of exploring gay culture and its impact and its intersection when it collided with techno music. And it's just fascinating that like gay culture and the dance areas and things like that have contributed so much to our popular culture. What is it you think, like, when you're making the documentary and talking to people, like, what is it you think about like gay culture that is able to like be curious and adapt and also even refine this music
and be so open and welcoming to all people that enjoy this
right
music? Like, so somebody like King Collier becomes the gatekeeper in Detroit. He's the guy who works for all of the kind of the promotion companies. He gets all the 12-inch copies of records that, are not for sale. He might have 4 or 5 copies, and, he'll sell some to the up and coming DJ so that they could play that record as well. So, what Ken basically brought, and he, not only Ken, but the entire kind of gay community, what they brought to Detroit dance music is something that needs to be highlighted and kind of illuminated, because, without that, you start having these I'm saying miscommunications, but these misunderstandings
Yeah.
of how this music came about. Like there's a part of the Detroit dance scene that's all based in teenage clubs and dance music, but sometimes that overshadows actually how that even came. You know, sometimes that story overshadows Ken and other Dwayne in the Mix, or Stacey Hell, like all these people who basically introduced this music to people like myself, and also the people in the film. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that without this introduction, these people in the film may have never seen a DJ or somebody uh, do what they're doing now. I mean, just to think about it, it's like these guys saw Ken Collier in the late 70s, early 80s, but by the mid to late 80s, they were now doing what they had seen kind of done in areas that were taboo,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So in that time, as Eddie Folk says, gay culture and stuff like that was taboo, but you had to be around where where this was happening. Period. And it had to be stated, in the film, especially when you start talking about Larry Levan, you start talking about Frankie Knuckles, you start talking about how this culture is kind of um, exploded around the country, and in particular in kind of these black beds of Chicago and New York. You kind of have to tell, or it just felt right to me to make sure that I told those connections in that story, because it made it at that point feel like a bigger story.
For sure. And I mean, like, even just from the mainstream perspective, again, gay culture was one of the early adopters of like David Bowie and Madonna and those kind of people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
kind of pushed them to the mainstream. And so this adoption from gay culture has given us so much popular culture. That sometimes, like you said, the roots sometimes get lost, or we don't know the origin of where these things came from. So,
Mm-hmm.
and to wrap up, then, like, a, a documentary is a beautiful thing because it gives you a window into a world you may not traditionally view. It's like traveling, right? Like, you go to a different
Mm-hmm.
country and you see how people live and how they eat and how they dance over there. So, if somebody was interested in going beyond the documentary and want to listen to some classic Detroit techno, what are some of your
Mm.
recommendations, either for like songs or DJs or both? What is it they should look into or listen to or fire up on the YouTube?
Man, I would start with the Blake Baxter catalog of when we used to play. Uh, I definitely would play that. I like, of course, all the recent Santonio records of You Can't Play Our Music, to Force Field. I definitely like E Dancer, Kevin's iteration, that kind of more darker iteration, or I want to say his alter ego. And you can't really start talking about Detroit techno without talking about Cybertron,
Mm-hmm.
any of the Cybertron of R9, Clear, Alleys of Your Mind. And, those records are seminal records and kind of what this music is built on. Juan's No UFOs. Of course, his work with Doug Craig, making Technicolor. Like those records were big records in Detroit. I mean, you would have 2 and 3 copies, and that's back when, like, a 12-inch was like $5.99,
Yeah.
$6.99, or you could find something for $3.99. You just, but those records you definitely had doubles of, and you wanted to do tricks and cut it up and stuff like that. So it was definitely a good time, and that music, it represents what I think is hardcore Detroit techno.
All right, we can leave it there. The documentary is called "God Said Give 'Em Drum Machines." It's screening currently at Tribeca, and hopefully you get a. Have you sold it yet, or are you hoping for more screenings, or what are you hoping following Tribeca?
Hey man, from your lips to God's ears, we're working on doing selling it, and our friends at XTR are helping us get that. which is a documentary film company, and not what do you call it, nonfiction film company here there in Los Angeles. They're helping us get the sale and get everything out. So we'll see how everything goes. But we definitely are looking forward to getting out and touring the film both in the States and in Canada. So hopefully we'll be there soon.
All right. God said, give him drum machines. Thank you so much for this like Universal Studios tour of classic Detroit and the Detroit techno scene. Thank you, Kristian.
Oh no, man. Thank you for your time, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yo, that was director Kristian Hill. The documentary is God Said Give Him Drum Machines. Here's a bonus moment I cut out of the conversation because my Sesame Street observation didn't quite fit the flow. Following that, stay tuned for a My Summer Lair PSA. Can I acknowledge one aspect of the documentary that I really liked?
Please.
So as you're kind of going through everything and you're talking to the different DJs and all these kind of things happening, every now and then you would sprinkle like an actual like 6 o'clock news segment of like them talking about electronic music or whatever it may be. And it's, I hadn't realized like growing up, grew up in the 80s and the 90s, but I hadn't realized that like there was that kind of like Sesame Street type dialogue and teaching moments. The culture is really purposeful about like this is what electronic music is. Like you might have heard about some things or whatever, but this is kind of what it is. And I know it's a goofy like stuffy white guy who may not be like part of the culture, and it might be like you said Wikipedia dry, but at least you're getting this like I said, a Sesame Street element of like what this culture is. And I don't feel like we do those kind of things anymore. Like we just kind of like accept like that you're supposed to know what techno is or Detroit music scene is, or you've just kind of stumbled onto something new, like some random internet search. And I didn't realize that there was purposeful learning when we were growing up like that.
Man, that was like the goal, is to kind of put those Easter eggs in so that people see that over time that this music was making its way into the zeitgeist, right? And by the time it got to the zeitgeist, like, do we know who these guys are, right? So you say in 1988 they come out on the cover of the magazine, which is, forgive me, when they come out on the cover of the magazine, it's what's it? The name of this slipping me right now. So 88 they come out on the cover of Record Mirror, right?
That's it. Yes, yeah.
By 97, it's a whole different thing. CNN is like, hey, techno, it's this new sound called techno,
right?
And they're showing it to you, but none of the guys that they're showing you are the cover boys. You know, so just in a from 88 to 97, this music almost like flipped. And when it flipped, is just like, how do you know where it came from? You know what I mean? Because it had just already taken off, you know. And then by the time the Napster era comes, I mean, it's over, you know, in terms of how we see the Techno 6, you know.
Yeah, that's why I made the analogy of like DJ Kool Herc, right? Because it's
yes.
A lot of kids, rightly or wrongly, don't kind of recognize like what he did and his contributions were to hip hop, and just all the earlier guys too. All right, Cold Cush Crew and those guys.
Yeah.
Like hip hop didn't just come out of nowhere, and it didn't start with like Biggie and Tupac or something, right? Like
right. But you can't tell the kids that today, you know.
Right.
Kool Herc is like he needs his movie, you know.
Yeah.
And nobody seems to have ever told it, but it's just like, to me, just like Ron Hardy, right? Like Ron Hardy, nobody in Chicago, there's no Ron Hardy mural.
Yeah.
You know, he's kind of, I'm trying to, yes, people remember him and love him. I just want to make sure that he's kind of talked about, even though this is a Detroit techno doc, he had an impact on all these guys. So, you know, just that, yeah.
Jazz seems to do a better job of keeping that history alive, right? Like, It's almost like jazz is like a third movie in a franchise. Like you got to watch the first two movies, right, to understand like what's happening and who the characters are or whatever. And I think a lot of times like techno and sometimes rap music, it's like it is technically the third movie, but it's like kind of like a James Bond movie, right? You can watch any of the James Bonds in any order, and it doesn't matter who the actors are or anything like that. You kind of get the general premise.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping that people see this film and, see it again, but, see it a couple times so that they can really have I guess, affinity for, the music and these amazing guys who created this music and girls, or, talking about Paris Gray as well. Like, just, I'm hoping that people can get into this movie and then kind of like go explore more, and not only with music, but maybe even coming to Detroit, coming to movement, coming to some of these festivals and kind of seeing the vibe,
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in late 90s in Detroit, reading Mitch Albom in the Detroit Free Press and things like that. It was it's a great city. Like it's very vibrant, but it's also got those rough edges, right? So kind of like what to avoid and what to look out for. But it is a great city.
For sure, man. Well, thank you, man. Thank you for your time, man. It's amazing.
If you enjoyed this conversation, some good news. My Pal Sammy newsletter. Let us extend the conversation. And I know. You think of email and you think of negative connotations. You think of work. You think of that sweet senior citizen in your life who keeps forwarding those weird chain letters things so that they welcome good luck. All of that is true. All of that is email. That's because for those people and those emails, the E in email stands for electronic mail. So what if? What if the E stood for experience? What if it stood for event? What if it stood for excellence? Wouldn't that be exciting? Email doesn't have to be email. Does that make sense? Go to mysummerlair.com/subscribe to sign up for the weekly pop culture My Pal Sammy newsletter. You will be elated you did.
Thank you so much for listening to me in a Netflix world. Drum machines, yo.